Okay, well, it's 6:02, so I will call this meeting to order by beginning with a roll call. I will start on my left. I moved it right. Mitchell.
Present.
Darian.
Present.
Leslie.
Here.
David.
Here.
Niall.
Here.
And I'm here, Rika. And I think just for the record, Steve is not here. So with that, we have quorum, and we can move into approving the agenda. Does anyone have any amendments to the agenda?
I have a suggestion just on the consent items, because I don't think it's going to be a long meeting. Could we take those off and I just had a question about them?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Any other comments? If there are none, then can I get a motion to approve the agenda with that change of moving the consent items? Including question.
Motion to approve?
And can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, so first by Darian, second by Niall. Is there anyone opposed or who wants to abstain? If not, then the motion carries and the agenda is approved with that adjustment. And then we can move into brief announcements from staff.
Good evening, Commissioners. I do have a quick two items I wanted to mention. So first of all, in case you haven't noticed on your agenda, we do have a special meeting scheduled for May 21st. Most likely we won't be in this chamber, council chamber, but the conference room right next to the chamber. This one will be actually taken for another meeting at that time. But this is for budget discussion items, special meeting, so that's going to be the only item as far as I know on the agenda is the presentation to the budget. We expect the first presentation to happen to the City Council on Tuesday, May 20th. I will strongly recommend to maybe listen to that one as well, so you have more time to kind of absorb and maybe ask questions if you have any or clarifications that you want to have. This way we don't have to go through the same problem, maybe conversation of presentation. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And I do want to give a little bit of an update. There was a question about the audits. We are still in progress for doing the fiscal year 22 audits. As I see it, I see a light at the end of the tunnel. There are a few items that are left that we still owe the auditors, but a lot of it has been done. And we have drafts that we're reviewing. The staff is reviewing from the auditors, but as I said, there's a few items still that are outstanding. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily have a date for you guys because it needs my attention, and my attention is right now on the budget. So unless I can clone myself, it's kind of difficult. So, and we have to publish it, as you may understand, for May 20th for presentation to council and then obviously to you. So I just need like a week of time to just focus on that, and hopefully that will be done, but I just have to make sure the budget is done first. So those were my announcements. I do want to mention that maybe you can put it on your calendars. We've reserved the room already, and we got the most people to consent to come in on Wednesday. That's the availability. So I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Any brief announcements from the City Council liaison?
Yes, thank you. So I think you probably know that we are recruiting for Fiscal Commission members. Very sorry to see some of you not renew your terms. So I don't know at this point if we're going to need to extend the filing deadline. It ended on May 2nd. Reviewing applications. Now, Councilmember Partida and I are on the interview committee. If you know anyone who you think would be an amazing candidate for this commission, just keep them in mind, just in case we do extend the application period. I just want to mention one other thing about your special meeting on the 21st. Elena said it might be helpful to review the discussion council has the night before, which is just our first discussion. We also had a really fruitful discussion. Elena, you might know the exact date. That date when we went through a lot of information you provided us with different possibilities and trade-offs we might have to make, and we prioritize things. Do you?
December 17th.
I was thinking it was December 18th, I wasn't sure. So if either you could send that to commissioners, or if you could just go to the city council meeting agenda for December 17th and look at that staff report. It's really informative, and it lays out a number of sort of possible choices, trade-offs we might be making as we move into the budget discussions. So that's all for me.
Are there any brief announcements by commissioners? Okay, then I think we can move into the next item, which is public comment. Is there anyone here for in-person public comment? Any written, recorded public comment? None received. Well then, I think we can move into, well, this might be something that I need a little bit of help on in terms of, because we moved some items off of consent and they go into the regular,
So since you moved an item off consent, you'll treat it as a regular item, so typically what you'll do is, did you move everything off consent? I didn't even look quickly. Is everything moved off consent?
Yeah.
So, excuse me, so you treat each of those items separately as a regular item.
Okay. So then we'll just start with the park maintenance and open space tax update. Good evening, Commissioner Selena, our Finance Director. So every year we have to bring rates for park maintenance and open space to council for approval. So this year the request was to also bring it up to the commission for review. With the park maintenance tax, it's a voter approved tax, same thing with open space. Open space tax has a sunset date, which is 2031, when it ends, unless of course it's renewed or extended by voters. The park maintenance tax is in perpetuity. The park maintenance tax has an escalator built in, which is 2%, so it updates or increases every year by 2%. Open space does not, so that stays constant all the time, and it's a parcel, those are parcel taxes, so you see those if you own a home here in Davis, you will see them on your property tax bill. So I'm open for questions otherwise, and what information is needed. Would you like to go ahead?
Sure, I do. So what discretion, if any, does the city have over these taxes at this point? And so or what recommendations could the commission make? So I'll throw out there, I don't think there's much discretion, but I wanted to hear what you think. That there's a formula here that has been adopted, they're pretty consistent, and so I'll leave it at that, react to that.
When the parcel taxes were already originally approved, the starting dollar amount was set, so the formula is just that amount that increases 2% every year. The parcel taxes, so for park maintenance, pays for park maintenance related expenditures, so it has recreation, park maintenance itself, we have parks, as well as urban forestry. At some point in time, there was an allocation that was requested that urban forestry would receive about $200,000, which will increase with the 2% every year towards that particular function. We do that as part of a budget. We allocate that amount to urban forestry. The rest stays with park maintenance tax. If you may be familiar with the city's budget, parks and community services budget is a lot bigger than the amounts that we collect. We collect about $1.6 million in parcel taxes for park maintenance, which is definitely not sufficient to cover the costs, but certainly helps with covering the costs. Is there any discretion? I wouldn't say exactly. I mean, we just follow what the ordinance says. We don't change it. And same thing with the formula.
You could go out to the voters.
Yes, you can go out to the voters in order to change it. But anything, whether it's COLA or the dollar amount itself, has to be voter approved.
You're not asking us to make any recommendations relating to going back out to the voters. I see the Measure H was renewed 2018, recall that one. The Open Space 2000 goes out to 2031. So there's no desire for us to engage in that level of detail. The time will come for that.
Well, I guess commissioners can always decide to recommend something like that. At this time, right now, we're only asking to approve the rate for the upcoming fiscal year. Is that a item that could be advised for the city council to look into? I guess it certainly can be.
Okay, I have one more question. So the things relating to park maintenance and how that money is spent and the open space funds, how that's spent, that matter is reviewed and on top of by staff as part of your ordinary government operations. And any commission review, or council of course could review, but any commission review, it goes to other commissions, right? Actually what that money is being used for example, on open space. And those decisions, they're not for this commission, they're for other commissions to make sure that money is appropriately used.
I believe once the Fiscal Commission was restructured, my understanding is the rates and kind of oversight is switched over to the Fiscal Commission at this point. With open space, you will see it in the budget, what is budgeted and not authorized to spend out of the open space, same with the park maintenance. So we certainly can ask questions as it relates to that. For open space, it's a restricted tax. And so it's set up in a separate fund of the city. And when the budget is presented, or if you look at any past budget documents, you will see that it's a separate fund and is tracked in a separate fund, revenues and expenses.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
So do you need us to make a motion to recommend? Okay. So I will ask if there is a,
I think you want public comment first.
oh, right, okay, sorry. Is there any public comment on the park maintenance and open space tax update item?
Sorry, I just had one clarification question. Did you say that oversight was for this commission? I thought you said the Fiscal Commission.
That's correct. So originally, prior to Fiscal Commission creation, the Open Space Commission used to review a lot of the items. And as it comes to fiscal related impact, at least it was described to me that way, it shifted over to the Fiscal Commission as the responsible body to do that oversight. Not the compliance side of it, but the fiscal side of it.
I just have a question or two about the general delegation of authority. You had mentioned the park maintenance perpetual tax and that a $200,000 allocation had been made to urban forestry. You had also mentioned that for significant changes to the use of the funds, there's outreach to the voters and voter approval is required. At what point is authority delegated to line operating personnel? So if a particular park manager wants to make a purchase, how is that administrated? Is there a formal delegation? Is there ever a question of whether line operating personnel has the authority to make allocation or whether it has to get commission approval?
Are you entering these questions just into public comment for this item?
if that's the standard procedure for getting them answered, yes, I can also ask them informally.
So I just kind of chime in if you don't mind. So when a member of the public raises questions during public comment, it's your prerogative as chair whether you want to ask staff to answer them immediately on the spot, or if you want to just ask staff to provide answers. Because it sounds like these are some really complicated questions, and Elena may want a little bit of time to clarify them and answer them. Or she may want to answer them right now, but it's your prerogative as chair if you want to ask Elena if she's willing to respond or able to respond in the moment. It's your prerogative
Thank
as
you,
chair.
that's helpful. Were there any other questions that you just wanted to enter as part of public comment?
No, those were the total of my questions.
Okay, thank you. Elena, maybe if you like to bring this, like go back to with these questions and then,
I'm trying to provide response and hopefully it answers it. So the tax collected, and then we present usually a budget on the annual basis to the city council, and sometimes staff takes certain items outside of the budget process, but during the year to council for approval. So by authorizing the budget, the city council gives authority to staff to then implement the program or carry out the program. So at that point in time, so council gives the authority to spend the funds in, I'm going to go with, in compliance with the ordinance the city has for the open space tax in this case, or park maintenance, either one. And so staff, depending on what the procurement policies are and how it falls, if it's over a certain dollar amount, for example, it may need to come back to council for approval, but otherwise the authority to spend funds, the budget, is given to staff and they carry out the program throughout the year.
That answers my questions. Thank you very much indeed.
I imagine there's no, is there any recorded public comment? None of seconds. Do you have a question?
I do, thank you. And if, this is probably a dumb question, and if it's better, take it offline, totally get it, but, you know, if this is like expected to have unanimous support, it's routine, non-controversial, requires no discussion, like I physically, like just give the time when we received it, couldn't even evaluate it, formulate an opinion on it. Like why are we voting on it? Like why is our vote needed? I guess really what's going through my mind is like, could I find myself in a deposition 18 months from now and somebody's asking me like, why did you vote to approve this? And I'd be like, I have no answer for you. And that just like feels odd to me, but it's not a question for you directly.
Would you like to answer that one?
I can certainly try. So with requirements for the taxes and our ordinance, there's a requirement that on the annual basis the rate is approved by council. So as I said,
City council.
City council,
Yeah.
yes. So this item for the very first time came to the commission this year. I do not believe, certainly not in my time that I've been with the city, that it's been brought to the commission before. So, I mean, it's your prerogative, I guess you can determine if you don't want to see it. But one of the things is it provides, by bringing to the commission, your, I'm going to call it oversight, that you've looked at it and I guess in a way deemed to advise the council to approve it. It's kind of similar as we have brought in the past, as you know, the rates for our utilities. I think it was wastewater that we did the approval to increase the rates by 5% or something like that. So that was brought to the commission for approval. This is in a way similar thing that happens. There is some oversight that is noted in the ordinance. So I guess this would be part of the oversight that this is the revenue we collect. So we present it to you in the staff report, what's expected to be collected for the year. And then when we present the budget, you would be able to see how much is expected to be spent in a particular fiscal year. So hopefully that is an oversight and ability for you to ask questions.
Can this be, does this need to be approved or recommended today, or can it be moved on to another agenda? Just so that there's time for folks to read through the materials.
Well, we were scheduling to take it to the city council for hopefully approval with your feedback on May 20th. These are the rates that are then also used to build the budget for these particular programs, because that's part of their revenue. So
Are there any other questions that folks have? But this is something that that is a routine item that comes before city council to.
Annually.
Okay, and then, so we can recommend to them potentially that, they would approve this, but they could also, they would be the final ones making that decision. That's correct. And would it be possible to provide follow-up questions on this, post this meeting then, if there are any?
I would assume yes, but I think the idea is as a commission, as a body, you would make have a discussion, and if you have questions, we'd like to take them as part of your, full commission to, when we bring it to council, to address if there were questions and inform the council what may have been your recommendations or concerns, whatever it might be.
I have another question then, since you opened it up. So, that was the focus of my question. How much discretion is really here? So I can get more particular. The rate is based on certain property descriptions, single family, multifamily, etc., and that's both for the open space and park maintenance. You have a per unit charge and other related. So how much discretion, if any, does the council have for those per unit tax? And I'm asking, because if there is discretion, then there's some possibilities to make adjustments to this, to implement policies that, for instance, might favor one class of property owners versus another.
So the classes that you see in there right now are defined in the ordinance, and so that's how it went to council. So with those classifications and obviously the original charges, what you see currently presented for park maintenance tax is the maximum we can collect right now, because we can only increase it by 2%. To the best of my knowledge, has been increased by 2% annually. So that's the most we can collect. Technically, I guess I would say the city council can choose, or you can advise to collect less. In terms of, can you collect a different amount depending on the type of the property? I would probably have to check with the attorneys if we can actually do that.
And I'm not recommending that. I don't know enough. That's the issue. It's pretty complicated, right? These kinds of descriptions of properties and tax rates, and so I understand then the desire to tax at the maximum, and that's already set. I would actually support that. I'm not clear whether there's any value in trying to divide the pie differently and spread. I just don't know. So this sounds like this has been the consistent way to do it, and whether that's the best way to do it in the future, because these taxes are going on for a while, right? 2031 for the open space and 2038 for the park tax. And maybe at some point it makes some sense to dig into this more. That'd be my thought. Whether that's with a subcommittee of this commission or some other place, I don't know. You receive consultant analysis on this from time to time, how these taxes are working?
No, we have not.
Okay, that's my comments.
Are there any other comments?
Yeah, I wanted to comment. I think, one, that it's good to bring this before this body. I think it's nice to have multiple layers of review and opportunities for people to think about these issues. And also on the topic of if you could change the rate depending on the class of like single family versus multifamily, I think if that were possible, that would be something to look into. I think it could be a policy that could encourage like densification and would lead to a better financial position for the city because it could contribute to lowering our how much we pay for things like infrastructure when we have more like incremental development and densification in the city. That's my comment.
Just want to clarify, to make changes to the classification, it has to be taken back to the voters. To the voters.
Oh.
Thank you.
So my comment is that, so my understanding of this process and like why it's in the agenda is because it's just sort of like a big picture, like check on something that's routine and you sort of have a recommendation and there's not much discretion because there's nothing really to, like there's nothing really being flagged that's an issue. But it's nice to have on the calendar for this body because some years there might be an issue and we expect that, you know, like staff would flag it for us and then we could have discussion, but on a year where it's like routine and normal, I think there's still value just to having it on the agenda. So I don't know if there's no other concept I would move to recommend.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion to recommend by Leslie, seconded by Darian. Is there any other discussion?
I have discussion, so I think I heard from Elena, so correct me if I'm wrong, that in terms of the open space tax, that I think you said the responsibility for monitoring that has gone from the Park Commission to this commission to see how that money is used.
So the rate setting side of it and I guess overall budget, but not necessarily what they can maybe spend the funds on. So not the, I'm going to say compliance part of it.
But
So
not
not
Parks
the
Commission,
property-
the Open Space Commission,
Open Space
not
Commission.
Parks, yeah.
Okay, so Open Space Commission does that. So again, then we're looking at, I'm not sure then, what are we looking at? If the decision as to what lands are purchased, that's the Open Space Commission. And then what are we looking at? And with that, just again, the tax rates and,
Correct.
okay, well, I guess my comment is probably a little bit more in depth in the explanation would have helped on some of this. And I realize it's always a trade-off, how much time and detail, but I think that would have helped our conversation to know exactly what we could have done. So I'll stop there.
So are there any other discussion on that motion? If there aren't, I would ask if there's anyone here who opposes the motion.
Abstain? Is that much? Okay, I don't oppose it.
Anyone in opposition? Anyone abstain?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll abstain too.
And also David. Do we have enough? I think we do. Yeah. Okay. And with that, the motion passes, and we can move on to the next item. So the other item would be the Belarus Community Facilities District's tax assessments, which, as I understand, is also one of those kind of regularly appearing items. So this is a Belarus tax, so for community facilities districts, and this particular ones are paying for a debt service. So when those areas, call it cannery, there's multiple ones, but as an example, cannery was built. So developers put in infrastructure, and the city issued bonds to help cover the cost of that infrastructure. And so the residents within Cannery Belarus district are contributing as part of a parcel tax towards payment over 30 years or so towards repaying those bonds.
So in this case, for all these districts, these are all bonded districts for originally then paid for infrastructure. And these are rates that we believe would be sufficient to cover the cost of the debt service payment, so principal and interest, and some administrative costs like trustee fees and continuing disclosure fees, things like that.
So this is just essentially asking for a recommendation related to continue this, I guess, continue what's been done in terms of.
Correct, that pretty much sets the rates. So for residents within those community facilities districts, it sets the rates, and that's going to be the parcel tax within those districts depending on perhaps size of the residence. So for Camry, depends if it's a single family or duplex or multifamily, and if they have commercial, then it depends on some of the districts, if it's a retail space, if it's office space, it depends on how it's set up. All of those rates were originally set up when the district was formed, and those classes were set up. Now, you should be able to see in the staff report that there's a maximum tax rate that could be charged. We do not actually charge any of the districts at a maximum tax rate, and we show the percentages at what rates at what percentage we tax them. So none of them at 100%. I want to say Canary is probably the highest, but mostly because it hasn't been fully developed yet and the commercial portion is not there. So as it builds, then the rates would go down for the residents, but there's no obligation for the city to make those payments. It's strictly related to those particular districts and the residents within those districts. There's one bond that is listed in the staff report that is being paid off in the upcoming year, and there's no collection so there's no rate for that particular COD in the upcoming year, so it's going to be zero. So that tax going away because the bonds are being paid off.
I will open it up for public comment, in-person public comment. Anything written, submitted, or recorded? Okay. If there isn't, then is there anyone up here who has any questions?
Sure, I'll get it started unless someone else wants to. Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I have just a few questions, just want to double check. So this is a helpful staff report, pretty complicated on these bond issuance, but let me see if I read it right. For the citywide metal roofs, and there's been bond issues, there's been refunding, there's been, but what I'm reading, there's still outstanding bonds relating to citywide, and when will those bonds be paid off? Just a simple question on those. It looks like some have been retired already, so I'm just trying to piece it in my mind here.
So these are for the current outstanding bonds, even if they were refinanced. So once the bond was refinanced, there's still a maturity schedule.
Yes.
So I might have to get back to you because I don't remember every single bond when they are maturing.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it just seemed like an opportunity for the city to explain that to the public. Hey, look, we got some good news. We're paying off the citywide metal roofs if it's coming up, and those bonds are being paid off. So yeah, I'd be interested in that. So my next question would be what the thinking is for Village Farms and whether or not there is already conversation whether that would have a metal roofs or whether that's too premature to talk about. And then if so, planning sees with this commission, my colleagues here, to keep their eye on that as that moves forward.
So I can answer that if you like, Elena. So I'm on the development agreement team, and we're in discussions with the applicant, and there's not been any, I can't really review all the confidential discussions, but there's no decision point on that yet, but I'll definitely absolutely keep this commission in mind for some of the, and typically the Fiscal Commission would review a development agreement. Is that not right, Elena? They review
Fiscal analysis.
You'll review the fiscal analysis associated with the development agreement.
Yeah, we made a request last meeting, as you recall, to try to see if we could get council, everybody voted in favor of it, to take a look at that development agreement, so that way the commission can have a better chance of weighing in on the fiscal impacts. That was under the new procedure that the council adopted for council-commission interaction. So that's one piece of it. I think that would be a helpful development if the commission had a shot at taking a look at it. But, you know, the development agreement, that's one piece. You actually have a project and you can see what kind of impacts it has on city finances. The Melrose stuff that flows out of the development agreement, I think that would be an interesting side question. I do know for the Mace Ranch folks, for the cannery folks that I've talked to, some of them were surprised at how that shook out with and so just an issue for the commission to keep its eyes on.
Any other comments? If there are none, then I would move to recommend to City Council approval of the rates as presented. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Darian. Is there any further discussion on this item? Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention. Denial. Any others? Not, then this is approved, and we can move on to the next item. So the next item is the fiscal year 25-26 investment policy review, and this is where we can discuss the work that Mitchell and I have been working on related to the socially responsible investment policy. So there's a memo attached to your materials, and I know that many folks might not have had a chance to read through everything, and so I can just provide a very brief summary of what's in there, but essentially, unless you would like to. Okay. So the memo essentially outlines 3 different options for revising the City of Davis's socially responsible component of the investment policy, just in response to community concerns related to human rights or fossil fuels, etc. And so each of the options here aligns with the city's legal obligations under the California Government Code, and we've had conversations with the city's asset manager, PFM Asset Management, who kind of answered a lot of different questions that we had for them around just the implementation of a policy like this, or what various changes would cover. So currently, if you look in Appendix A of that memo, you can see the current policy. So currently, the city is not allowed to, the city's dollars are not allowed to be invested in any company that receives more than 51% of gross revenues from fossil fuels, weapons, manufacturing, cigarettes, alcohol, or gambling products. And so the other options that you see in the appendix are potentially options that PFM noted would be possibilities if there was an interest in restricting further around aerospace, firearms and ammunition, or even like fossil fuels, coal, oil and gas. And so the city is only allowed to invest in debt instruments, just to be really clear. And so PFM noted that there are about 300 issuers or companies that issue debt or entities that issue debt that the city can invest in. And so these would be the potential restrictions that PFM noted would be possible. So I guess I could open it up to any questions related to these options, but just to, well, actually, let me just, so the first option would just be increasing the amount of sectors from fossil fuels, weapons manufacturing, cigarettes, alcohol, and gambling to include, so essentially coal, oil and gas services, pipelines, tobacco, beverages, wine, spirits, brewery, casino services, gambling. These are all kind of already included. Gambling, lottery services, racetracks. The additions would be private corrections, aerospace defense equipment, electronics, military, explosives, and firearms ammunition. PFM already knows how to do this, pulls the names from Bloomberg as Bloomberg defines different sectors for companies, and so there would be no additional charge by PFM to do this. It would also not greatly increase the number of companies that would be covered under or that would be excluded from the list of approved issuers. The second option would essentially it would further avoid companies that receive more than 26 to 50% of the revenues from fossil fuel. You can kind of see them listed there in the memo. And then the third option, which would be a more custom policy, would be any company that's more than 25% of their revenues come from these areas. So right now, the policy on the things that are restricted is 50% or more. This would essentially bring things down to like 25% or more on the areas listed. But yeah, so those are just brief summary in case if folks hadn't had time to read it. But feel free to ask any questions. Or if there's any additional comments.
Yeah, can I just clarify also, like in our discussion with PFM, the asset manager for the city, it was emphasized that, especially for options 1 and 2, it's essentially what we're discussing is a matter of like principles of the city, because it's not going to have a tangible effect on our investment returns, and it's not going to require any further payment or fee for service from our investment manager. So it's essentially, we're just discussing, do we think it would be in the city's interest to restrict some of our investments to further align with values that we may or may not wish to align ourselves with. But as far as, at least for options 1 and 2, and even option 3, it's low, the amount of effect on return. We're not really affecting our investment returns or the fees that we're paying for the investments that we do make.
Are there any clarifying questions on just this piece?
I was just wondering what was meant by, and I think I know, by non-pooled investment, and to what extent the city actually has a non-pooled investment in any of the debt instruments of any of these major companies.
So the non-pooled investments would be the ones that are not in the camp or lake portfolios, which are managed by the state treasurer's office. Percentage, I could not, I have it somewhere. But it's actually, I think do you have it?
I don't have the percentages. I generally know roughly the dollar amount, but I'm not sure what the percentage would be.
At one point, I know you looked it up for me, and I'm trying to grab it from the back of my brain, but more than the majority of our assets are in the pooled money account, for sure. Just where that exact number is, I can't recall right now.
So I don't know what percentage is, but I know with camp, it's about 40 million, a little bit more. With lake, it's about 56 million, so the remainder would be what's the FM?
We have very small investments with our regional bank, a CD, but it's
Can you
not.
sense of the total size of all investments, potentially, the ballpark even? Maybe I can just look through our old emails. Like,
Yeah, I have to look at that. I will look back at it, sorry.
And you're just taking input from this, right? So
Just
things,
clarifying
yes,
questions
things to
before
look
you-
up, that's consistent with your request to try to get input, so we get what I'm hearing.
I think I just want to just clarify to what Mr. Sandino said, but I think we're looking for some feedback from the commission as a whole, because the subcommittee then will have the discussion with the city council subcommittee, because that's the body that kind of gave you the task to look at it and review that. And then that would be brought up to the city council subcommittee, who is then going to work with full council to make a determination as to how to adjust the policy, if so, if needed.
I have a clarifying question. When I was reading this memo, the question that I had still remaining after I read through it was, what were the impacts of the different options on the city's return? And I'm hearing from Mitch clarifying that all of these options have no impact. Is that correct? Like there's no effect? Is that what
So
you're saying?
PFM can't, I mean, we asked PFM this exact question, like what would be the, Mitchell asked this exact question of what would be the impacts, but essentially it would reduce the universe of investable opportunities potentially, but not significantly. And so PFM noted that it's not likely that this would have a significant impact just because the universe of companies that would be limited in terms of the greater pool of potential opportunities would be limited, and so that was the response that we received, is that it's not likely to have much of an impact.
Yeah, I think they said no significant impact. So as far as an impact on returns, like negligible, not worth discussing. It's not going to be anything that's going to material affect the amount of investment returns that we make.
Like for instance, I think for just related to the military contracting or controversial weapons companies or the aerospace, those ones, that would be about 7 companies total, of which the city is not significantly invested in to begin with right now.
And then 2 other points for discussion, if I may. I went back and I found our old thread about talking with Director Adair about how much our investment portfolio is, which Director Adair had previously said that our total investment portfolio for the city is $175.5 mil, and of that, count 23% with 32%. So it looks like the non-pooled, I think this indicates that about 45% of our city's investment funds, which is 45% of 175 million, so it's a little less than half, so a little less than 80 million. It sounds like from my best information that I can gather.
Can I follow up on what non-pooled, I mean, so all that 80 million is not the pool. How much of that is in an individual highly rated corporate debt instrument versus a pool, not technically a pool, but a fund of AAA corporate debt instruments? It's really just a question. I mean, it seems, I don't know, whether you go and buy a debt instrument of just one company. But maybe you do, I just don't know.
So maybe do you have the response to this, Elena? Because otherwise I can give just my take based on PFM's responses.
Well, I would say, I'm not sure if they're still considered investments in specific companies, but so for example, there are some asset-backed securities. Those technically, I mean, the underlying investment, I guess, or underlying securities, it, for example, could be auto credits kind of things. So those are being pooled, but it has to be, in order for governments to invest it, it has to be at a certain rate and grade before it could be allowed for government investing. And that's all specified in the California Government Code. So there are investments of that type, as well as we have bond purchases with all other municipal, state governments type of things, so municipal securities. I cannot necessarily say how much of our investments are having that underlying. We can look at asset class, like asset-backed securities, and see how much it would be, but I'm not sure about others. So the investments, we have a lot of US Treasuries. Whether they're pooled for a particular purpose, I'm not sure I would be able to answer that. Well, same thing with probably PFM, because they buy it as an investment because they're issued by the US government.
And if I may also, I think we asked for some some detail on where the investments were, but I think some of that information is proprietary and wasn't shareable with us for that reason.
Yeah, their approved issuer list of the 300 issuers, they were not able to share with us. But I think based on the way that they responded to certain, to our questions, it's my assumption that, they might have different clients who are going to be invested in treasuries to some extent, and they might be pooling that to obviously buy a bigger bond. But generally, they are investing with various issuers as they issue debt, and they might be pooling that money with other funds just to make that purchase, but our own investment would be separate.
Yes, our investments are separate because they're actually kept by our custodial bank. So PFM manages it, but they have no, access to the actual investments. So I don't, just to kind of, I guess, reiterate, so they are, I can't say if those are specifically pooled, but they are purchased on the city's behalf, and when we receive a trade ticket, it says that City of Davis is buying them, those particular investments.
Can I ask some questions? This is more around just making sure this doesn't get used against me at work, because obviously there's some complicated, there's some significant differences between here and work, but I just want to be clear. And by the way, thank you for doing all the work. Makes total sense. And I think you may have addressed this, Mitchell, but would adopting any of these options cause us to have to sell anything that we currently own?
Not currently, no.
Okay, so the only impact of this policy would be on, it wouldn't impact existing investments, it would only prohibit us from the manager. It would only prohibit the manager from doing.
Yeah.
Okay. It would rule out options that they're not currently utilizing.
That's the answer that we received from PFM.
I want to clarify for whatever reason in my head, and I apologize for not knowing necessarily this, but I want to say the PFM at some point mentioned maybe 1 or 2 investments would fall in the category under option 3, if that's the case. So one of the things that eventually, if in the end, commissioners want to recommend to City Council and Council decides to approve it, to go with option 3, we will need to make a decision as to how to handle potential investments that we currently have if we approve this new, a new restriction or, more limited restriction kind of thing. But that's assuming we'll go that way.
Okay. And I guess the only other observation I would have is that I would probably just err on the side of simplicity. All else equal, and go with option 1, because I think that will X out probably all the stuff. 99.9% of the stuff that we intend to X out. It's just like adding Sustainalytics as a second screening point might not add much in terms of value or the substance of it, but and then option 3. Obviously we have some exclusions along the lines at work, but it may just complicate things a little bit much.
Well, I think option 1, like the current policy, the current policy option, that one, it is kind of state of California related, like some of these are state of California related in terms of are they all state of California related? Like the cigarettes, alcohol, gambling, like.
No, I think some of those are current restrictions that we have in the policy. This actually adds a little more categories to, or the sectors, I should say, to the exclusion that I think we're discussing.
Right. Yeah, no, I just meant that I think the current policy is based on kind of other policies within the state of California. So if you see it before, that
But I think there are some that were added that are specific to the city of Davis, yes.
My turn? Okay, yeah, thank you. I echo those comments for putting the time in this. It's not easy, so I appreciate it. So take my comments as just ideas. I think if this is going to go forward to the council, the memo needs to be expanded. Easy for me to say, but because I'm not writing it, I know there's time limitations, but I think it needs more details in terms of anything that you can add on some of the definitions, anything that you can add in terms of actual numbers, like money within current non-pool investments versus pool investments, any details that you can add, and it might be in the memo, it might be in a new comparison table, I don't know. But that was lacking for me. I had no sense of the numbers that involve and what the impacts might be. So that'd be one suggestion, expand that, make it more detailed. The other thing that was missing for me was the connection to the investment policy. I'm not clear to what extent these actual investments that are in the comparison table, how much of that is already dictated by the investment policy, which puts limits on how much can be put into corporate notes, mutual funds, etc. So that'd be my other suggestion, to see if you can tie it into better into the investment policy. So that's number two. Number three, and this is echoing, I believe, Miles' comment, and maybe I would put this in the comparison table, that you can actually project what the impacts would be relating to this. Will this trigger changes in the investments right away? How much time would be available to make those changes? How significant are these changes? So I put that there as number three. And then number four, I know we're just getting started in the conversation, but I think a recommendation would be helpful, or maybe you do that when you meet with the council, I'm not sure. But I think that should be made transparent while there's a recommendation. So those are my four comments. The last one I have is just an observation. I know there's a desire to consider to make these socially responsible, and it makes sense to me. I don't necessarily think the current policy is not socially responsible, though, so we may be okay on that. But if you're looking at option 2, it is interesting that you have these blue Bloomberg sectors, and right, I'm not in detail here, I just looked at it this afternoon, but you have a lot of things that I know impact Native Americans. You have here on casino services, gambling, internet lottery services, racetracks. Those are all, a lot of those might be investments in the Native American community. So I think those things need to be thought through a little bit, that if you're doing these things, what kind of actual social benefit are we providing, or what would we be taking away from those Native communities, if anything? Now, I don't have a lot of details, of course, how you break these out, and maybe some of the casino services are being provided by non-natives, but I know some Native communities have started to engage now. They've been at it for 20 years. They're some of the leaders in providing those kinds of services. So just throw that on the table as another complexity. So those are my comments. Again, thank you for putting your time in this.
I can respond to some of your questions or comments. Thank you for the suggestions. They're very helpful. I don't like. I think that it's definitely within the realm of possibility to add a lot of the things that you suggested. So thank you for that. One of the things that I would maybe just clarify is that so projecting impacts can be quite challenging, and that's what PFM told us. And I think logically, like, we don't know at any given time what opportunities are out there for, like, it's essentially if an entity is putting out debt for purchase, they might or might not at any given moment have a need to issue debt. And so then that might or might not be an investable opportunity at any given time. So projecting impacts would be hard to know, because it's not clear if there would even be that opportunity. But there were some other things that you mentioned in terms of like how maybe how this might restrict the investment universe and having more clarity around that. I think that's something that's more possible. I don't know if anyone has any other clarification.
Yeah, I think we do have some of that information not included in this document that we present here, like such as how restrictive would this be for our investments? Like we can see in our communication with PFM, our asset manager, they said that so if we were to consider some of these restrictions, of the 252 unique parent companies on the approved credit list for potential purchase, the amount of companies with any involvement in any of these categories that we are discussing for exclusion, 5 companies in small arms, 1 company in private prisons, 44 companies in military contracting, and 7 controversial weapons. So around 50 out of like 252 companies that would potentially be excluded. And then as far as, we didn't put, I think it's a great point about, putting in a document about fiscal impact, just so it's very clear. And yeah, but I just would reemphasize that we were assured from our communication with PFM that this is more of a policy decision. They said they wanted to stress that this is a policy decision, not a return decision. As long as the city is not adding too many restrictions, the impact on returns will be minimal, if at all. So it's, I think that's very sharp insight, that this should be, I think, information that we include in the memo so that it's available to the people considering that council.
Can I make a quick observation? Yeah, I take a lot of comfort in a couple things. One, about not, to the point about not impacting returns, which I think is credible for sure in this context. I found a presentation a while back from PFM. It was from like mid-23, but at the time, the pool, at least at this presentation, was about $53 million, and at that moment, 30% of that portfolio, only 30% was invested in like short, medium-term corporate bonds, and then there's another 4% commercial paper. And it was so dominated, over half of it was AA rated stuff. There's a lot of AAA, or a bit of AAA, and then a lot of single A, so very high quality. And it's like, at that quality level, it's such short duration, it's like they almost become like interchangeable in a way. So it's, if we're excluding AA rated Chevron, going with AA rated Toyota Motor, if that's a good example, they're very interchangeable, and the rates are just like so competitive. I do struggle to see how it would our returns. Like you almost have to like try to hurt our returns in that type of program, which I'm not sure you can really do.
I would like to just add maybe a little bit to the conversation. What you're looking at in terms of potential exclusions and things like that, what it really affects more so for the city is diversification of the investments. So yes, it's a policy, but in a way, call it limits the different types of investments the city has the ability to invest. So you're correct, investment return is not the top priority because, first of all, our goal with the city investment policy, it's not like you personally invest in pension funds and things like that, or, so that you do earn a return. The city's goal is to preserve the principal. So we are not out there to actually get interest, get dividends. Our goal is to preserve the taxpayer dollars and not lose money as much as possible, obviously. So it still is on the market, but that's part of the reason why the quality of the investments are set up a certain way. That's why the California Government Code restricted it to that level. Again, the universe of investments overall might be this big. What we can already invest is this small, so you're further restricting it. So I think it's really a question of diversification. Again, not so much of a return, so that's where you're coming from as well. But the credit qualities of the investments and things like this is already high, so it's not like they can go down regardless, because there's a requirement that we have to meet a certain quality. And in terms of how much you can invest in various types of securities, that's defined by California Government Code as well. So they can tell you, you can invest 100% in US government, but for example, maybe only 30% in corporate securities. So that's defined in the California government code as well. And so PFM has to, based on a policy, because we identify those items in our policy, they have to match and balance it out in that way as well. So as we limit it, then obviously the universe of investment limits us as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that was kind of build on my earlier comments. That's why I think we could tie the description better to the investment policy, which reflects state law, government code, and how much is available relating to corporate notes. You're right, 30%. So that, you know, that affects kind of the review to me of the council. Okay, how much are we potentially talking about at most?
Yeah, I mean, to sort of piggyback on those comments, it feels like a reasonable add to the memo. I think that would be helpful to sort of like expressly outline the potential like trade-offs of each option, like the potential benefits and the potential risks or downsides, like the lack of diversity in the diversification or the different like sectors that we might be divesting from, but that might not be in alignment with values. And my second question was, as you guys were doing your research, did you come across any insight or like literature on whether, I think Commissioner Gallon like asked us in a couple of meetings ago, whether there's like it's an effective form of protest, like whether like taking on one of these options, deviating from the current policy actually has an impact in terms of expressing to these companies that, you know, they're not in support of whatever they're doing.
I didn't see information on like how effective it was at actuating any of the changes.
But I think that's something that we can see. But I didn't come across anything, but definitely if we take another look and find something, it could be helpful to include in the memo.
But could I clarify, this is not necessarily about having these exclusions, or at least my understanding is not necessarily about driving change in the world. It's more about saying what we do and don't want to be making money off of. I mean, whether the world takes that signal or not, that's maybe secondary. Is that
Yeah, I
fair?
think it's just like, does this reflect the values of the city?
Yeah,
to do
okay,
this
yeah.
In terms of the socially responsible piece.
Yeah, do you have a hard time seeing the city of Davis getting too excited about some of these sectors?
Or to people who are, commented.
I just wanted, if I could add just a comment, because this is a really helpful conversation for me, and I know that the subcommittee with Mayor Veitel and I will meet with you after whatever you decide. And all of the points you're making are really, really important. They're all things we've all been thinking about. To answer your question, Commissioner Ng, about the studies, in general, what the studies show that unless you really have enormous investment power, you don't have an impact on the market. So as Rika said, it's about showing our values. The one thing that I do want to bring up, because it's one of the things that I think precipitated this request. We on council were asked to do this by community members. This was not something that originated just with council. And at the time, some community members were concerned about the language in the current policy because the words weapons manufacturing didn't mean what they thought they meant. They assumed that those words had a meaning that was much broader than it did. And so what I notice now in the new proposal, you're using terms aerospace defense equipment, electronics, and military. So are those defined in some really precise way somewhere that we can see so that we on council will better understand exactly what we're excluding?
Yeah, so I think what's noted there is that those definitions that PFM uses come from Bloomberg. They have a classification system and how they kind of identify different companies, and it's based on where they get their revenues from. And so that Bloomberg list of classifications is available and could potentially be that makes sense.
And the other thing I would mention too, because you've had some great comments here tonight, and a number of the things that are suggested to be included in your enhanced memo, many of them I think are described in the investment policy, because all that you're seeing in this document here tonight is just a short snippet. But if you look at our current investment policy in its entirety, you'll see a lot more background around the prudent investor rule and the government code and why we do what we do. So just so that you know that. And ultimately, there would be a mock-up. So ultimately, at the end of the process, whatever you recommend comes up to subcommittee, comes to council. Before council acts, it would see a mock-up of the existing policy, so we would know exactly how the wording is proposed to be changed.
Did you have something you wanted to add, Elena? I wasn't sure. Okay.
Can I clarify something? So we're not necessarily going to recommend any of the options. We're going to recommend the council to consider this, these opportunities, but not, we think we should take option A or option 1 or any of the particular options. Correct?
That would be, I mean, I think that would kind of just be, if that's what we want to do. If we want to make a recommendation for a particular option, I think that's reasonable. I feel like I'm interested in maybe providing a range of options and all the relevant information that's been requested here, but kind of leave that up to other folks. If there's an interest in recommending a particular option.
My suggestion on that would be you meet with the council subcommittee to sort of figure out what would be most helpful. I'm guessing a range of options.
It seems like you should serve them all to the subcommittee. Of course, I prefer option 1 just with simplicity, but it's up to them.
Are there any other comments, questions? Okay. If not, I will open it up to public comment in person. Or any recorded or written public comment. Okay then, well, I wonder if anyone wants to make a motion around recommendation or have any additional comments.
So my suggestion is not to make a motion. You've got our comments. You can move forward, appreciate what you've done, but it sounds like you're going to do another draft with the comments. And then if you wish to bring those back, I think that'd be helpful. That's kind of up to you. What do you think? I mean, I think you got some feedback from staff.
Just a question for Elena. When does the City Council take a look at the investment policy for approval?
Expecting to bring it up, so the next item you will see is the changes to the existing, what I'm going to call it, ongoing annual review that we do. That's expected to be brought up to council on May 20th after you look at it. But it could be modified at any point in time during the year. So we even had a conversation, I had a conversation with PFM, because I did not want to change social responsibility in any way, because that's what the commission and subcommittee of city council are working on. So the changes that you see in the next item are very, I'm going to say benign, because there was no government code changes and things like that. So, but expectation, we'll bring it up at May 20th, because it's part of the budget document. So we want to make sure that it's included when it's approved. But it can be changed at any point in time, because our policy itself requires annual review for potential changes and things like that.
Okay, so we could potentially,
Can I ask, I'm not sure if I understood that. So let's say that the subcommittee comes back 3 months from now, after May, and they wish to work with council to make a recommendation to change the investment policy. They could do that at that time, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be.
So the policy would be updated again. So if we update for the changes that, like I said, in the next item we're going to discuss, we'll update it. But once it's finalized, the decision is made how to change it, if we want to change it. I mean, obviously, there's always an option as is stays, or whatever else is proposed. So whatever change that would be, we will make an update. Council will re-adopt the policy at that point in time with the new changes, and that's going to be a new policy in effect from then on.
Just gonna throw out there, I see it up to the subcommittee. Do you have time, if you're so inclined, to take these comments and do another draft before May 20th, if that's the date, which to me is a short clock, because I know you're busy folks? Or whether or not it makes more sense for you to take more time and then bring it up another time. So I'll leave that up to you.
I think we can probably make the updates, we have the information to do so. And then to this particular memo. But are there any other suggestions, comments, questions, discussion related to this item? Okay, well, I think, we don't have to make any sort of motion or decision here.
No, there's nothing required. It was for discussion and really to provide feedback to the subcommittee of the commission, to then take that feedback to the city council subcommittee, because that's who you're working with on the city council, who gave you direction to review the policy. So that's feedback you will work with them as to what is recommended.
Then I think we can move on to the next item, which is the FY 2025-2026 investment policy update.
All right, back to me again. So what we have presented, so you had a discussion earlier, obviously, on the social responsibility and potentially making changes to the policy. We review the policy on the annual basis and present it to council. It's one of the requirements of our current investment policy, that the review is done at least once a year. Generally, we do that review, so one, it's included in the budget document because it becomes public, as well as any updates that may be occurring from the California Government Code, or any other best practices that might be occurring. We usually work with PFM to assist us with any updates. Obviously, they keep current on everything, as it relates to investments. So they had a chance to review and propose their changes as well. And really, there were no code changes this year. So the only change that they're proposing, which I'm going to call it not that substantive, is change in the name of the company from S&P to S&P Global. So you will see what was attached to the staff report is a red line of the policy. When we do take it to council, we present the resolution to adopt, which is a clean version of investment policy attached, as well as the red line version. So assuming we're going with it as is, these are the changes. Again, if at any point in time, council or commission work together and decide that additional changes to the policy would be needed, it will be brought back to the council for additional changes and approval. So that's kind of summarizes what's in there. As I said, there are no substantive changes this year.
Maybe it was just the S&P.
Yes,
Make
literally,
sure
this, yes, and that's why I was mentioning that originally PFM was trying to see to incorporate the recommendations that subcommittee was going to make. I mentioned to them, I don't think that's going to be ready at this point in time, so we'll take it as a separate item and update the social responsibility section specific to whatever the proposal will be and the recommendation will be.
Are there any questions, comments, or any other questions, comments?
Not here.
I guess I just had one maybe question. So under the reporting piece, at the end of the, well, not the end, no, it's like page 9, so the middle. So in the middle of the policy, there's a reporting piece. How often has that changed significantly over time? I'm just curious to know, because I think it's, oh, sorry, page 8, according to the actual document, but then page 10 on my like Adobe viewer. The item 12, reporting. So generally speaking, the quarterly reports provided to us by PFM to the city, so we have the portion of the reporting that is done by PFM, it's given to the city, and it's quarterly, but it's only on the investments specifically PFM is managing. So there are other investments like Lave Camp that are outside of PFM's management. So normally we include the investment report and try to provide it to council on a quarterly basis. We haven't been able to do that because one of the things that's included is, I'm going to call it reconciled bank balances. So our staff has been working on bank reconciliations and trying to close the year. So we have not presented it to council as of yet. So that's one of the things that we have to catch up on. I guess my question was more, it's not noted in here, the expectation of PFM to be providing certain reporting to the city, is that something that should be in here?
As part of their contract, we require them to do that. So because we do have a contract with PFM and they're expected to provide us information. As a matter of fact, they provide us monthly reports and quarterly reports. But the quarterly reports are the ones that I would say required. So monthly is just, I guess, bonus for us.
Okay, thank you. That was just my question, is if there was some mention of PFM or camp relief reporting in the policy itself, but I guess not.
No, it doesn't specify, because if the city ever decides to change an investment advisor, we don't want to include necessarily a particular name of vendor in there, so it's open.
Well then, like, I suppose, what, maybe this is like but like, what about just the investment advisor, or if the city is contracting with one, would provide it in a certain, but I guess that's within the contract. I guess as camp and leave, do they also provide it at the same schedule?
They do not provide reports to us, so we get their information online. So the camp usually provides a statement in terms of, what the interest is earned, what the balance is at the end of the year. At the end of the month. Lave, we just go online and pull our statements online, so they do have that. But they don't necessarily provide per se a report. There's a performance report that Lave has that's available on the Treasurer's website because it's a pool. So that's the only things that are available.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I'll open it up to public comment. Any in-person public comment or an online? We're done with public comment, okay. If not, I don't think that there is an action needed here either.
We just ask you to receive the information and, provide feedback before we take it to council. So when we take it to council, we can say that what the commission may have had to say.
Well then, if that's the case. There are no final comments, then I'll move into the master fee schedule.
Good evening, Commission members and members of the public. My name is Karen Sangera. I am the Finance Manager for the City of Davis, and I will be presenting our Master Fee update. So a little background on Master Fees. Most of our fees are just annually increased by CPI. We actually do not have to take all of those to council. We just take the ones that are outside of the CPI change to council. So I'm just going to highlight some of the notable fees because in the staff report we did include a detailed list of the fee changes as well as the reasoning behind the fee change. So fiscal impact of the proposed changes for FY 25-26, we're looking at about $11.9 million in fees and charges. Most of the fees, again, are just changing by the pre-approved CPI inflator. For the city manager's office, one of the really notable changes is we've added the dining or outdoor dining program to the fee schedule. It was actually approved via a resolution listed there in October of 2024. So we're just including it because they made G Street a civic space where they can use the sidewalks for outdoor dining, and it just is adding it to our master fee schedule so we keep things consistent. The police department extra duty pay goes up based on our labor projections as well as our increases in workers' compensation rates and all of the other inflators. So that one changes outside of CPI. What we've done is we've taken the labor projections that will be presented to council as a part of the proposed budget. That incorporates some of the MOU changes that are going to be taking place in the next month or so. So that includes that. And then for community development, we just removed some of the fees that were for social services and housing and put them on their own schedule since they're a separate department now. And in terms of social services and housing, the program went into effect in about 2017, and they have not updated or evaluated their fees since. So this year what they did was they looked at comparable rental program structures with Sacramento, Berkeley, and I believe Richmond to kind of figure out how they're structuring their fees, and they up or mirrored their fees to be a little more appropriate. Public Works, the Unitrans fees are set by Unitrans. They're usually taken to council and approved via resolution in August. So we just updated the fees and show that it's part of the resolution. Urban Forestry, they are getting rid of a couple of things, which is the donation administration fee and the replacement plaques. They did up their fees to adequately reflect the time it takes for an arborist and admin staff to process a tree removal permit. So you'll see that we updated the fees to appropriately classify those. Parks and Community Services. On this page, you'll mainly see like the fees are increasing for cost per recovery. Things are a lot more expensive now. So with that, staff time is more expensive, operational expenses are more expensive. So they're upping the fees for cost recovery. You'll also see, sorry, my glasses. They're sorry, can't see. The camp fees, you'll see the ranges kind of vary now. That's because they're offering, instead of week-long camps, they're also offering like 3-day camps. Some of the fees went up because they take the camps on excursions, so there's a higher end of the range for that. And then they also updated the deposits since they rarely ever use them, and they are requiring the renters to get insurance. So they went ahead and like lowered those fees since they rarely ever use them and end up returning them to everyone. And then they also added an overtime rate since they're actually having people work extra to facilitate the events that are going on longer than the projected hours that they thought they were going to. And then one of the changes that you'll see on here is there's a 5% increase to rental fees for fields. And that's because the Parks Department went to council last March and they proposed closing the batting cages because they were losing a lot of money. And council direction was to increase the rental fees for the fields to help kind of balance the loss and to be able to keep the amenity open for the public. And then we also added the G Street fee to parks because there is a single-use option of the G Street civic space, and that's something that Parks will be handling, so that we have that there. And then our recommendation is just for you guys to review the proposed changes and facilitate the discussion and provide feedback.
Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a few, so thanks for making that presentation. So if you look at the first page that you have, or the first slide where you have the breakdown for each department, and so I'm looking at the handout too. So the community development department, as I see in the memo, was not included in your analysis, if I have that right, nor in your slides. Is there a reason for that?
So community development was included. It's just that they didn't have significant changes outside of CPI except for removing the housing and social service fees from their schedule. So if your question's around why their budget is lower, that's something Elena can help answer.
But I'm right, though, it wasn't included in the analysis, other than it was in a different name then. It was part of, in social services relating to affordable housing fees. Is that where it got moved to?
So just to clarify a little bit of the master fee schedules, what usually is brought up to the commission and council are changes outside of the CPI. So at some point when the fees were adopted, the CPI was built into a resolution that said every year your fees could increase with CPI. So what is brought up to council is that changes that are not part of the CPI or something outside of the CPI, so significantly more, greater increase, or rather elimination of fees completely. So with community development, the fees are there, however, there are no changes outside of the CPI, so they're not necessarily highlighted, but they are still there as part of the master fee schedule.
Okay, well, yeah, this is good, because you're getting then to kind of my point, which maybe I misunderstand, but community development fees deal with fees for builders that are moving forward with projects.
Yes, so
Primarily
community
plans.
development has a different combination of fees, so there's planning fees, there's building inspections, and then there's also just generally city fees. They're just collected at the time permits are issued or certificate of occupancy is issued, but they're your development impact fees. So there's a variety of fees that community development collects, but they are not necessarily always the department that is responsible for them.
So this has been an old chestnut for the prior Finance and Budget Commission as to, for certain fees that are collected by community development, and I believe this is for new projects, that those fees have not had an increase based on a consumer price increase for some time, right? Is that correct? If someone, for instance, wishes to move forward with building a home, that their fee cost for the city, that cost has not been increasing 2% like some of these other fees. They've been locked in at 2009, I believe, was the year that the last time they've been increased.
When I think the last they were reviewed, the CPI component was removed. So at the time.
Yeah. So I'm doing this just for the commission because they weren't here, but this has been a point of contention for the commission. I've strongly favored that those fees should also be part of be tied to a consumer price index. So they're not. So, consider what that might mean for new development, whether it's Village Farm or something else. I don't know what the right number is, but I don't think the report is completely accurate. I think there should be noted that for certain fees that are part of community development, those aren't tied anymore after 2009 to the consumer price index. I think that should be explained. And then I'm planting a seed with the commission if you wish to dig into that again. I think it's an issue. We've heard in the past that the reason that the city in 2009 decided to drop that index to the price was, well, we're in the middle of a recession. We needed to reduce the pain. And then one of the reasons that it hasn't been reinstituted is that, well, in order to make it successful legally, we need to have the general plan done and do a cost study and those things. So I'm not really in alignment with that, but I do think that this is an issue that at some point needs to be looked at, whether it's a subcommittee, whether it's a council, whether it's a consultant, that we have not changed our fees for some of them since 2009. So I would adjust the staff report for that. So that's my one comment, and then I got one other suggestion, which I throw out there. And I don't know if this is the case, but hey, I like to play sports, and I know you're making some adjustments for recreation programs, which I'm hearing that they're not generating enough revenue to cover staff. So I believe they should cover those. I understand that, but I don't know what kind of outreach does the city do to inform these different leagues, different users of recreational facilities that a change might be coming. We're proposing to increase fees. We want to give you some notice, some impact. Does that go through another commission? Does that go to them directly? How does that work? Or maybe it's considered two small potatoes and they just get the fee increase and either keep playing or not.
Well, we do a public notice when the fees are approved and go to city council, so it goes in the newspaper because that's a requirement. Also with fees that are parks and community services, they are on a little bit of a different schedule. Majority of the fees increase for the city effective in July, so beginning of the fiscal year. With parks and community services, the fees are actually don't go into effect until the end of the season. So once the season is over, so that whoever, but leagues and whatnot, they don't have a change in fee, so it goes through the season and then it updates. It also coincides closer with the schools. So we have an information obviously that goes to council, and would make an assumption that the departments then inform their particular, who they work with, that what the fees are. But I can't tell you for sure who they send it.
Yeah, so that's just my suggestion, that whatever outreach you do, I would make it direct to those involved that are involved in those sports, whether it is through communication to the league organizer, whether it's to the teams directly that they can access. I don't think, although the legal notice is appropriate, I don't think that gets communicated to the average athlete out there that's playing that these changes are coming. And I think that'd be helpful. I mean, they should know about it and they can provide their 2 cents. I think that better that way. So I make that suggestion. That's all I have. Thank you.
Can I ask a point of clarification? What was it that's not indexed to inflation or consumer price index? Which of the fees were you saying are not indexed?
I can take a shot at it, but you would be more authoritative.
So I think the reference was made to the development impact fees.
Sorry, you said
Development impact fees.
Oh, thank you.
So my follow-up on that, you can take this is like a mystifying area, but you can take a look on the city website and you can see the cost of getting a plan approved, getting the necessary engineering approval, getting enough design, whatever is entitled with building a new home or other kinds of new facilities. There's a fee that's associated with that. And it's similar to what you see, these charts here, but it's a chart that's online. It's complicated because there's a lot of nuances to those fees, but those fees have not changed since 2009. And that's been the issue.
Commissioner Spindino, I would clarify that. So
That's why I wanted you to do it. So
development impact fees are the ones for a new development. So if new, like Village Farms were to come in and do new developments, some of the basic inspection fees, like building inspections, planning, those are part of the fee schedule and they are updated with the CPI. It's the more of a development related for when brand new development comes in. So then those fees are the fees, I think, that are not updated with CPI. So currently we
So
have
I
no
stand corrected on that, so if, I was trying to keep it simple, so you're saying if somebody has a vacant lot in Davis, which there isn't very many, but if somebody was building on that, then those fees would now be inflation adjusted since 2009?
So it depends. You're going to collect a variety of fees in there. So if you're going to have building permits, just inspection related, those are adjusted. The development impact, with the fact that we're bringing a brand new development, those are not.
So I'll just throw out there then, where it's really significant would be a large new development. So this conversation came up during the last new developments before this commission, for the city, including Disk and Brentwoods. So I'm sure the issue will come up again with Village Farm, so just wanted to make you aware of it. And I do think it's a complex subject, but I do think it deserves some review and thought. Since 2009, now that's 16 years in the rearview mirror.
Any other comments, questions? I'll open it up to public comment. Do you want to record it? Okay. Then I think you're looking for a motion. Are you looking for a motion to recommend that the city council approve the fees?
We can, yes, but the goal was to, again, do the same similar thing, get a feedback and any questions answered.
Well, then I will just move into the next item, which is the subcommittee update. So the down payment assistance loan program subcommittee. Is that one?
I can give that update. We're still currently drafting our memo. I just got another email today from someone from the state that works on down payment assistance programs that we're going to incorporate into the memo. So yeah, we're working on it. It should be, I guess, related to that. Did we decide, Alina, on when there would be space on the calendar for it, so that we have sort of a framework of when we need to?
So we have a couple of busy meetings, so in June, obviously. My recommendation would be, council usually takes a break, well, this year in July, used to be in August, but this year in July. So general commissions have the same, I'm going to call summer break, at the same time when the council is on break. So we would take it up back in August, I would suggest, because we have pretty meaty discussions coming up, so.
Question related to procedure. My understanding is Commissioner Shansky will not be renewing, right?
That's true.
So when we discuss the issue on which he contributed greatly, what is sort of the procedure for still having him involved in answering questions, or can he not?
Well, he certainly has participated, and while being on the commission, that's his work. After his term is over, he can no longer participate in the subcommittee work. If at any point in time, Commissioner Sansky wants to come out and be the speaker here at the commission, he is welcome to do that as a resident of the city of Davis, whether it's in front of the commission or the city council, but he cannot participate as a subcommittee.
But potentially, like if he wanted to answer some questions by the subcommittee, then they could pose them to him as like a citizen, or like as an expert in this field.
Or something, yeah.
There's this really tricky nuance in the Brown Act that I don't even want to explain about when you have a subcommittee working with a member. I think you could ask him a question. Yes, I think you could ask him, how could you not? Right, but he can't really participate as a member of the subcommittee when he's no longer on the commission.
I'll be here in August, whatever it is, and happy to answer questions.
Are there any other comments related to this? Otherwise, I'll open it up to public comment. Anything recorded? No?
Can I ask just a clarifying? So in terms of our deliverable, that's going to be in August?
That's correct. So I would expect the deliverable will be some sort of memo discussion, so for the full
Here at
commission.
the Fiscal Commission?
At the fiscal commission level, because your presentation to the council subcommittee, again, subcommittee gave you the task to complete this research work, or whatever you want to call it. So you'll bring it to the commission, and so as a full body, you'll decide what the, recommendations are, what the best approach is, and then that document, once discussed and you determine this is what you want to do, will then be presented to the council subcommittee with your work.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure I understood the sequence.
Yeah, well, I just have a question. Are we in it sounds like we're kind of in the calendar, because it's related to if not, I'll wait till
Well, I think maybe, I just want to close out the subcommittee update.
Okay.
So yeah, we can move into the calendar now.
May I ask just a quick clarification, going back to the master fee schedule. So we've done a discussion, I just was reading the recommendation part of it, and so we've got your feedback, obviously comments, but recommendation does have to recommend that the city council approve fees. Can we just then state that?
That's what I was
So,
asking you, if we
thank
needed to make a motion on that one. But
Sorry, I apologize.
It's okay. So we can just go back to that one, and I can make a motion to recommend that city council approve these fees. Would anyone like to second that motion?
I second.
Okay, second by Mitchell. Is there anyone in opposition?
I'm not in opposition, but I want to see if you take an amendment that that the staff report be modified to better state what's going on with the community development fees, because you just read the bold statement, it looks like all fees are subject to that inflation index, and that's not the case with community development. However you want to phrase it, I'd let staff do that. And then the other part of the recommendation that the best outreach possible should be used for fees relating to recreation, including, if possible, to give that information to the appropriate team officials or legal officials. I don't have the structure in my mind since I was a player rather than a supervisor, but I think that would be helpful. That'd be can you live with those?
Yeah. Are there any other suggestions or recommendations or discussion on this item? Okay, so then, is there anyone in opposition to the motion? Anyone abstaining? Okay, Niall abstains. And with that, motion passes, and we move back into the long-range calendar.
So, as I mentioned, we have the special meeting coming up on May 21st, a little different than our regular meetings. So we have usually a much longer agenda, I'm going to say. But the special meeting is going to be very focused. So as I mentioned, it's going to be a budget-related presentation for the upcoming 2 years. And then, as we stated, we were supposed to have an update on the water fund for May, but our utilities department wasn't quite ready yet, so it had to be moved to June. The expectation, I guess, is, or for me, what I would like to see is once we do a presentation to the commission on the 21st, you'll be able to go back, think about the budget, and then we'll come back again, and if you have questions, or, if at a special meeting, you decide to, establish a subcommittee who wants to do a deep dive into budget with questions and whatnot, and then we'll come back in June, and try to respond to the questions, especially if there's ability for the subcommittee, or if there's one, or just commissioners to give us the questions ahead of time, before June. We will do our best to respond to those. So that particular meeting is probably going to be, a heavy meeting, I'm going to say. Plus, you're going to receive at that meeting the storm drainage fee update and the water fund update. And then, as I stated here, we don't expect to have a meeting in July, so everyone gets to have a break for this year. Again, it coincides with the summer break that the city council takes, and we just had a discussion, so next time you'll see this, we'll update it for the August meeting to include the work of the down payment assistance loan subcommittee.
So Wayne, if I could just, to be sure we're all clear, so you're not asking this commission to form a subcommittee tonight for the May 21 meeting. They'll probably create it that night, because that's typically been the practice of the Fiscal Commission as it's going through the budget process, is to form a two-person subcommittee that can really dig in and come up with questions. So you'll do that at your May 21st meeting.
Again, you so desire, I don't want to necessarily just say this, as Donna said, this is the past practice that has been. If that's how you want to proceed, great. Or whatever other alternative you choose to do, you can do that too.
Thank you, that history, that's helpful. Thanks for that, that's helpful. Are there any comments or questions around?
So I think that suggestion is a good one. I think to have a subcommittee dig into it is useful and then present it. So I favor that. I also just question, because I hear the down payment assistance loan program coming in August. And historically, the commissions don't meet in August. I guess they could, but because the council is on vacation, right?
It got switched this year, so it used to be the break was in August. This year, council chose to switch it to July.
I see. So the commissions are now paralleling that calendar. Okay, thank you for that.
Any other questions, comments, clarifications? Is there any public comment in person or recorded? No. You don't need a motion for this one, right? Okay. Well, then we can move to the end. I move to adjourn the meeting at 7:54. Is there a second?
Second.
One second. Seconded by Leslie. She's the one I heard first. And anyone opposed to that? Or abstain? With that, the meeting is adjourned.
So why were you staying on more information? You just think to a council?
I would exercise oversight.